Here in a different role today, but on behalf of the Indiana Attorney General's Office and Attorney General Curtis Hill, we're happy to be here today and hopefully to raise some awareness on an issue that is prevalent in our community. You know, in 1992, I started as a prosecutor in LaGrange County, Indiana. And for over 10 years, I was there. And during that time, we never thought of human trafficking. We had child molest cases, we had sex molest cases, we had victims, but human trafficking was not on our radar screen, either as prosecutors or as part of the community. In 2003, I left LaGrange County and went to Elkhart County, also as a prosecutor. And in Elkhart County, as with LaGrange, the words human trafficking never came up. Now, we did have a couple of cases involving Oriental massage parlors. And we went after the Oriental massage parlors who were engaging in sex acts as part of the massage. And in going against those massage parlors, our primary concern or objective was to shut them down. And in one, I recall, we seized over $80,000 in cash, which was on the premises at the time. But we also arrested the women who were there as prostitutes. We didn't think of the women as victims of labor or sex trafficking. That wasn't something that we even gave credence to. It wasn't something we even thought about. Our objective was to shut it down, and the most expeditious way to shut it down was to take the assets of the business and to arrest the people who were there. In 2006, I came to Indianapolis as supervisor of the homicide division, but in 2011, that division was expanded and retitled into what was called the Special Crimes Unit. And Special Crimes Unit included all things homicide, but it also included, among other things, vice. And so in 2011, I was tasked in Indianapolis with overseeing prostitution and, for the first time in my career, human trafficking cases. And what we started to learn through, and this was roughly going back to 2011, that we had some inroads in the Marion County Prosecutor's Office into this arena before 2011, but no concerted effort, no prosecutor dedicated to prosecuting these types of cases who really understood the dynamics of the victims and victim mentality and grooming and how all these trauma bonding and how all these things come into play. So it was for the first time that we began looking at that in 2011. I want to show you a slide that should come up on the screen here, because this is something put out by a group called Polaris in 2016. And the red highlights incidents of reported human trafficking in the United States. Does anyone notice anything in particular about that slide? A lot of red on the borders, but look at where we are, right? Because when I put up this slide, what we tend to think about when we think about human trafficking, when I first started thinking about human trafficking, it happened over there, right? It was a problem in Bangkok. You know, I couldn't probably locate Bangkok on a globe, but that's where the problem was. Or it was in one of those other countries. And even when I became aware that it was a United States problem, then I began thinking, well, where is the problem in the United States? It's in California, right? Or New York. Maybe Texas. And you can see some commonalities there. Maybe Florida. But not in Indiana, because Indiana, we're in the heartland, the Bible Belt, the whatever words you want to use. So it doesn't happen here, right? But look at the map. It is here. And that's one of the things that hopefully, if nothing else, if you take nothing else with you from what I say today, the message that I hope to send is, it's here, it's in Indiana, and it's not just in Indianapolis. It's in all the counties in Indiana, and hopefully you can take some flags, some things to look at with you when you leave here today, so that if you see something that looks like human trafficking, you can identify it, or at least be concerned about it, and you'll know what to do about it. But also, you can help spread awareness that this is not a third world problem, it's an Indiana problem. So, one of the things, first of all, that I would like to talk about, since I am a lawyer, is what is human trafficking? It's kind of hard to know what it is exactly, what to look for if you don't know what it is. Indiana has a statute in our Title 35, which is our criminal code, on human trafficking. It defines sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Those are the basic two types that we have. And when it defines human trafficking, it says for adults there's a requirement of force, threat of force, or fraud. That someone be brought into this lifestyle because of force, threat of force, or fraud. That has been a shortcoming in our statute for some time. I'm pleased to report July 1st, our statute is changing to include coercion. Because a lot of times what happens in these cases is it's a withholding of something. It's dangling children over someone's head, the woman's head. It's using some sort of coercive force to get the person, the woman, or sometimes the male, because this is not just limited to women, to comply with this lifestyle. And so effective July 1st, it's going to be force, threat of force, fraud, or coercion. But those things come into play. And then we have labor trafficking, which involves a forced labor or involuntary servitude. And then there's sex trafficking, which you would commonly think of with prostitution or some sort of other sex act. Now for juveniles, if it's a juvenile victim, that force, threat of force, fraud, or coercion does not need to be present. For a juvenile, it's simply if they're brought into that lifestyle and they're performing the act. That's what human trafficking means legally. One of the things I'm going to come back to is for labor trafficking, for those who are caught in a lifestyle of working for either no wages or very, very small wages. Labor trafficking, we have in Indiana a classification of felonies. We go from a level 6 felony being the lowest up to a level 1 felony. Labor trafficking is a level 4 felony in the state of Indiana. It carries 2 to 12 years. And if you think about that for a minute, 2 years at the low end of the spectrum. Sex trafficking is a level 3 felony that carries 3 to 16 years. We need to do something to get the penalties increased, and that's something I'm going to come back and talk about nearer to the end of my presentation. So that's what human trafficking is. Also in the statute, the Indiana Attorney General's Office, which is where we come in, has what's called concurrent jurisdiction with prosecutors around the state to investigate crimes relating to human trafficking. That's something that the Attorney General's Office has not used in the past. Until this year, with the creation, we have in the Attorney General's Office an investigations division. And I'm chief counsel of that investigation, of that division. And within that division, we have a number of things that are done. It involves a myriad of different things, but we have created this year a human trafficking task force or initiative within the investigations division. We now are hiring, have added a couple of investigators who have law enforcement experience. And then you have myself and a couple other attorneys, one of whom is another experienced, I won't say gray hair because she's sitting in the room today, But another more mature, experienced prosecutor who can handle these kinds of cases. So we are offering for the first time, we're taking the initiative under the statute to get involved with human trafficking. And we're doing that for a couple of reasons. First of all, because human trafficking, even in the United States, it does not respect state or county boundaries. And what we found, Indiana has 91 prosecutors, 92 counties, 91 prosecutors around the state. But in Indiana, having been a county prosecutor, in the county prosecutor's office, 3 different counties, I know how prosecutors' offices work. And that is, you think about your county and the safety of the people in your county. It's very hard for a county prosecutor to think outside their county lines. And that's not the fault of the prosecutor. They simply don't have the funding or the law enforcement investigators to allow them to do that. So they look at crimes within their community. And if that crime, if it's labor trafficking that may be in 5, 6, or 7 different counties, if that's going around the different counties, the prosecutor's office is simply not equipped to handle it. The other thing is, not only does human trafficking not respect county lines, it doesn't respect state lines. And so we, in the short time that we've been up and running, have already met with the Kentucky Attorney General's office and the Ohio Attorney General's office to start cementing relations with those agencies who are active in human trafficking investigations. They've been up and running longer than we have, and so we're kind of looking at what they're doing. What have they done successfully? What have they done that's not so successful? What messages can we take from it? Now, the negative to looking at that is Ohio's Attorney General's office for human trafficking has a budget of several $1 million. Anyone here want to guess what the Indiana Attorney General has budgeted for the Human Trafficking Initiative within its office? 0. Because we don't have the statutory funding. That's something else I'm going to come back and talk to you about, because there's a summer committee this summer where the legislators are meeting to discuss funding one statewide agency to take the Human Trafficking Initiative. And that would be under the statute us. So in essence, we need money. We may be reduced to having a bake sale at some point, in which case you'll all be invited. So anyway, when we talk about human trafficking in Indiana, I want to talk about a few cases with you to give you an idea of what's happening in Indiana. Now, these are resolved cases. They've been in media, so I'm not talking about anything that's an ongoing investigation. But I want you to understand a little bit about where it occurs and how it occurs. Because if you haven't already seen this, if you pick these up, they're outside, out the doors at our table. There's a sex trafficking and a labor trafficking flyer here. And they give you an idea of some of the common indicators of sex trafficking, common indicators of labor trafficking. These are kind of like flags to look for. But sometimes real-world examples help you understand how it plays out. In 2012, a guy by the name of Pardip Singh moved to Indianapolis with his spouse, who I'll call PK. Singh and his spouse, she was married to him in March 2006 in India. When I say married to him, I mean it that way. This was an arranged involuntary marriage on her part. So he's a truck driver. They moved initially to New Jersey when they came to the United States. Then they came to Indianapolis and moved into an apartment building here in Indianapolis. The first thing after they got here that Pardip Singh did was contact PK's family in India and demand $64,000 from them, or he would kill her. The second thing that he did when he was here in Indianapolis, was he decided to make some money that he would sell PK's services for $500 a night. And there were men who took him up on that offer. He beat her, but there came a particular night when he brought a man to the apartment, and for whatever reason, PK on that night said no and slammed the door. We don't know what prompted that, but that's what she did on this one particular night. In response to that, Singh went into the apartment, drug her out, threw her down 2 flights of stairs, and then began to bang her head into, there were metal mailboxes out there. The buyer of the services, he took off and he fled. Now, the reason I talk about this story is within the apartment context, neighbors had heard what was going on, but no one reported it. Why did no one report it? There's we don't want to get involved, right? But there's also sometimes well, I don't know what's really going on. They're a different culture. Maybe that's normal. Hello, no, okay? I don't care what their culture says. Beating somebody is not appropriate. It's never appropriate. But we have this, I think, tendency for us, well, if I don't know exactly what's going on, I don't want to report it. And one of the messages that we're here to send is you can report it. There are ways that you can report it anonymously. But give law enforcement, give us the ability to look into it. There's a little card out there on our table. You can pick up one of those. It has not only a phone number you can call, which is it's a national hotline, but it's set up by state. So if you call this general number and you say you're from Indiana, one of the first questions it asks is, what state are you from? When you say Indiana, that message, and you don't have to give your name, and it doesn't track your phone, no super secret government stuff, squirrely stuff going on. It's not going to track your telephone number or anything like that. Just give us the information. That information goes out to other agencies, but it also comes to the Indiana Attorney General's office. So it comes to me. Okay. On the back side, and certainly if it's someone being beat, by the way, there's still 911, right? So use 911. But there's this hotline number if you suspect it. On the back side is an email. Now on here it's humantraffickinginfo at atg.ia.gov. We have gotten that shortened to just HT-info. You can use either one. You can use the full one or just HT-info at atg.in.gov. But that comes directly into my unit. So we can take a look at it. But nobody did that in the Singh case, so what happened as Singh is beating on PK, she manages to get away and get back up into her apartment, or their apartment, and she locks the door. Any guess as to what Singh did at that point? He didn't break the door, because culturally she's in the wrong. He called the police. Okay? So the police responded. But breaking the door, that's what we would expect, right? But that's not what he did. He called the police, and the police responded. We don't know whether PK would have said anything or not. Officers did note injuries, and IMPD does have a human trafficking detail or unit that responded ultimately to this case. But with Pardip Singh, finally a neighbor came out and said to the police on the side, there's something going on. This has been going on. Pardip Singh was arrested for attempted promotion of human trafficking and received a 14-year sentence at the Department of Corrections. That's one form of human trafficking that we've seen in the state. Another form that we've seen is the Adam Mcnally case. Adam Mcnally epitomizes everything that's wrong about a stepfather, I guess, in that Mcnally, when he moved in, the stepdaughter was 11 years of age, and he began molesting his stepdaughter. That went on for about a year. When she got to be 12, Mcnally decided that rather than just molest her, what he would do would be to start selling her. So he put her on Craigslist. And quickly found 2 regular buyers. And so he started selling his 12-year-old stepdaughter to these men and making money. As she got just a little bit older, and by the way, the whole time that this is going on, the stepdaughter is going to school. Were there no red flags? I suspect there were, but I also suspect that people didn't know what to look for. You know, she was probably, based on everything I know from reading this case, she was the quiet one, the one with low self-esteem, the one that was kind of off by herself anyway. So we just let her go, right? And she falls between the cracks. So anyway, ultimately, Mcnally takes his stepdaughter aside and gives her a movie to watch and says, I got something special for you tomorrow night. Myself and these 2 other guys, we're going to 3-way you. And she watched the video, and with as much as she had been through, that scared her to death. So what she did was she got on her bicycle and she rode to a fire station just down the street and reported. And Mcnally's serving 55 years in the Department of Corrections. So the point is, though, for 2 years, the stepdaughter lived this life. Weren't there flags? What phone call might somebody have been able to take that they didn't take? The third case I want to talk about is the Joseph Dennis case. This is a runaway case. Joseph Dennis was 27 years old, and he came across this 15-year-old who had run away. And she'd been a runaway for about 4 days, reported as a runaway, and he came across her. Now, did Joseph Dennis immediately rape this 15-year-old? No. He groomed this 15-year-old. He bought her clothes. He took her to nail salons. She was his girlfriend. He let her still go to school. Got her back in school. Now at school, she told people that she had a 27-year-old boyfriend. Does that raise any flags to anybody? As I get older, it's harder for me to remember when I was 15. But when I was 15, I can pretty much tell you 27-year-old, they're old, right? But she had a 27-year-old boyfriend. And so finally what he does after 3 months, he just does this, 3 months of this grooming process. 3 months removing her from parents, she becomes the whole circle. Then he hooks her up with an older woman who's going to teach her the ropes. And they do. And so the 15-year-old girl is in this lifestyle and can't get out. She goes to the Dollar General store at one point to buy some clothes, and she's crying while she's at the Dollar General store. But nobody notices the flag. And so nobody makes a phone call. Finally, one day, she goes to a convenience store, and she goes into the convenience store, and she sees an old family friend in the convenience store and runs up to the family friend. And that's how law enforcement gets called. Joseph Dennis is prosecuted and again is sentenced to 14 years. He's sentenced also to 14 years in the Department of Corrections. So those cases, we can't sit here and say this doesn't happen in Indiana, because those cases are in Indiana. One case that we have now and I can't get into the details of it other than to say it involves a 15-year-old from the northern part of the state. But to show you some of the tools we have and some of the things that are going on, we got a phone number, and there's her phone number, and there's a program that we can use, and we put that phone number into that program to see it tracks. Well, because they're putting up ads, she's putting up her photograph connected with that phone, out there on the websites. Like, now, Backpage, if you're familiar with Backpage, it just got shut down. That's good on one hand for us, but it's bad on another because it's going to go to other sites and it's going to go back underground. But in any event, they use these Craigslist, Backpage, plentyoffish.com, all these wonderful websites. And so this program searches by her phone number how many times her ad's been hit on. And we looked her up, and it came back over 320 times, her ad. So that's some of the things, those are some of the things that we're dealing with here in Indiana. Now, I just have a few minutes left. For the Indiana Attorney General's Office, what we're doing, we have a number of initiatives. The first of which is, like I talked about, the coordination of law enforcement efforts with the county prosecutors. We're trying to bring together, we're working with federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. We've only been in existence for a few months now, but we're already involved in multi-county investigations, and we're getting involved to try to coordinate that sort of thing. We're also working with prosecutors to offer our assistance in handling these types of cases, because too often your local county prosecutor, they've never seen one of these. And prosecuting these kinds of cases, having an understanding of how to prosecute these cases can be critical, because we're too used as prosecutors to wanting the victim to cooperate. And the victim's not going to cooperate in these cases for a myriad of reasons. Most of the times they're not. So we need to build, there's a theory in prosecution, we call it evidence-based prosecution, where you don't deal with the victim, you deal with the evidence in a case, and we're working to help prosecutors with that. So that's another component to what we're doing. We're also working with other agencies throughout the state. You've probably heard some of them today. Agencies like IPATH or ITVAP, Ascent 121, Hope Center, all to try to say that we need a multi-approach, multi-hands approach, multidisciplinary approach to dealing with human trafficking. This is not a one-size-fits-all, and it's not something where we can afford to be territorial and say, my little agency is going to try to do all of this, because we can't. The problem is too big. And then we have a legislative component to work with the legislature. As I said earlier, effective July 1st, our human trafficking statute is changing, and it's changing for the better, but we need to get those penalties up. So, as I conclude, how can you help? First thing, as you're here today, but educate yourself and educate others. If you're involved in an organization and you'd like to have an awareness program, go to that htinfo.com website, shoot me an email. Myself or other attorneys within the office, we're more than happy to come out and speak at programs and educate, because the trafficker who's out those doors is dependent on us not knowing what they're doing. So we need to have these awareness programs. We come and we'll train anywhere around the state, and that's a part of what we do. Your tax dollars at work, that's no cost to you. So educate yourself. Secondly, see something, say something. Use that website. Traffickers also rely on your silence. They depend on it. And so even if you're not sure what it is, if something looks wrong, send a message. Because what happens if you see something that looks wrong, you send a message, and 2 or 3 other people also saw something that looks wrong, and they sent the same kind of message. Now we can really start to look at it and say there's a pattern there, so say something. And then help us with the legislature. Talk about the fact, send your representative and senators an email, call them and say that, first of all, the human trafficking penalties need to be increased. Level 3 and 4 is appalling. Okay, we need to get the penalties raised. And secondly, with that summer committee that's taking place, let them know if you do support our office and the Attorney General's office, let them know that you support a centralized statewide agency approach to human trafficking, recognizing we're not trying to take authority away from the prosecutors. We've been there. We're not trying to override or supersede your county prosecutor, but what we're trying to do is say when it comes to multi-state and multi-county organizational crime like this, we can help. So that's all I have to say, and I appreciate your time.